Welcome back to my channel and good day to you. Today we're going to drink some coffee. We're just going to talk about rifle cartridges. Recently watched a video on the I'm Your Huckleberry channel, which by the way is an awesome channel. I recommend you go over there and subscribe if you have not. He's got some really cool videos. A recent video he did was talking about inherent accuracy of Weatherby cartridges. I thought he had a lot of really interesting points, and it was a very good video. Which got me thinking, can a rifle cartridge be inherently accurate? Is it possible? This is kind of piggybacking off of some of the stuff that he talked about. So, inherent accuracy. Is it possible for a rifle cartridge to be inherently accurate? So, when you talk about a rifle cartridge, of course, the thing that makes a rifle cartridge unique is its case design and its chamber design. So the thing that separates a 6.5 Creedmoor from a 6.5 PRC is got nothing to do with the bullet. It's the same caliber bullet. It's the case. And the thing that separates a 308 from a 30-06 is the case. So when I talk about a 308 cartridge, the thing that makes a 308 cartridge is the case. Primers are the same. There's large rifle and small rifle, but you can interchange primers. It doesn't matter. Bullet is just a caliber. It's just the diameter of the bullet. It's the same. But what makes a cartridge unique is its case design. So obviously, a high ballistic coefficient bullet at long ranges is going to buck the wind better. It's going to retain its energy and velocity better. In other words, it's going to lose it a little slower. And so at long ranges, of course, a high BC bullet is going to be more accurate, or at least easier to be more consistently accurate with regard to wind and other aspects. So like in a 6.5 caliber, a 140 grain bullet up is going to have a very high BC, over 600. In a 7mm, you're probably talking about a 160 grain plus. In a 30 caliber, you're talking around a 200 grain plus to get that high BC bullet. But that's really got nothing to do with the inherent accuracy of the cartridge. That's the bullet. So a lot of people say, well, the 6.5 Creedmoor is just inherently accurate. I don't disagree with that. But I think the main reason it is because it was designed around the 140, 143 grain bullet, which has a high BC. So that's the main reason why it's accurate at long ranges. It's a good long range target round. And therefore, any 6.5 that has the fast enough twist rate is going to have that same aspect or attribute that's going to make it accurate. But once again, that has nothing to do with the inherent accuracy of the case. In any caliber, as long as the twist rate of the barrel is proper and fast enough, you can get the high BC bullets. But I guess really, if you think about it, inherent accuracy would be more close range, right? It wouldn't matter so much whether the bullet was high BC or not. If you're just thinking about what makes the cartridge accurate, at shorter ranges, more like 100 yards, would be more where you would actually see if one cartridge was more accurate than another. A great point that I'm Your Huckleberry came out with on his video was that indeed the Weatherby cartridges are inherently accurate, but one of the main reasons why is because they only come out in Weatherby rifles, which are well-made quality rifles. So you're not getting, a $300 cheap budget factory rifle that's going to shoot poorly. And so you pretty much never see those cartridges chambered in anything but a Weatherby and Weatherby's quality. So they are inherently accurate. Which brings up a great point. the rifle itself is probably, well, not probably, is more of an important aspect of the consistency and accuracy of a particular chambering than the chamber itself or the cartridge itself. Any cartridge in a well-made, high-end factory rifle is probably going to be more accurate than same said cartridge of any kind in a cheaply made rifle, generally speaking. And in fact, you could take what some would consider to be a cartridge that's not inherently accurate, that's known for being inaccurate, and if it's made by a custom gunsmith that knows what he's doing, it can turn out to be accurate. So in reality, I don't think it's so much the cartridge itself, the case design, that makes a cartridge accurate or inaccurate. It's more the bullet, which you can choose any bullet you want to choose, and it's more the quality of the rifle itself. Another point that he brought out, which I agree with, is recoil. So if you have a 378 Weatherby in a, 8 or 9 pound rifle, it's going to have a lot of recoil. And I mean, it might, if you practice with it for years and you get accustomed to the recoil, it's possible that you can overcome it and not let it affect you. But more than likely, generally speaking, all of us, myself included, when there's more recoil, it affects our accuracy. And that's usually why the lighter recoiling rounds are generally seem to be more accurate, is because we're just more confident that when we shoot them that we're not going to get rocked. A 243, for instance, or a 223, you just know when you pull that trigger, it's not going to hurt. And you're calmer, your heart rate's probably a little slower, and it's just not a big deal. Now, once again, for hunting purposes, your adrenaline's flowing and you're getting ready to shoot that nice elk. It's probably not a big factor, but just shooting for accuracy, whether it's competition, long range, target shooting, whatever the case, felt recoil is a big deal. So, and that's why, of course, people that shoot competition have very heavy guns to minimize recoil. Sometimes they'll use a suppressor or a muzzle brake also to reduce recoil. So effects of recoil definitely going to affect accuracy. The bullet hugely affecting accuracy, and of course the rifle itself. But what about the case? Case design. Is there inherently accurate case designs? Maybe. So when a developer sends the SAMI specs to SAMI to be standardized as a new chambering, they not only send the dimensions of the case and the cartridge and its overall length and all that, they also send the dimensions of the chamber. And there are some chambers that possibly would not be considered inherently accurate. Maybe their tolerances were not really tight, they were loose because they were not designed for long-range competition. They were designed to, cycle the bolt quickly without getting jammed up. They were designed for military purposes, and in that type of application, you're more concerned with it functioning reliably and not having a hang-up than you are extreme accuracy. So there are some loose throat and chamber dimensions. There is some that are designed with free bore, and sometimes that can cause issues, sometimes not. Other cartridges are designed with tight tolerances, with heavy BC bullets in mind, and therefore it's designed for long-range target shooting. So I would say yes, to answer the question. Some cartridges are inherently accurate because their dimensions and their chamber, throat, everything was designed for tight tolerances and accuracy. And other cartridges were designed for either hunting or military use, and those same things were designed to be more loosely tolerant with not having as tight of tolerances, and designed for more reliability, accuracy in mind. Kind of like a Glock. If you shoot Glocks, you know that they almost never jam because they were designed with loose tolerances in mind. But a Glock is not the most accurate. So there is a trade-off. And some go with the more reliable, some go with the more accurate. Having said that, take any one of those cartridges, maybe a 300 Win Mag, maybe a 30-06 that was designed with military or hunting purposes in mind, that doesn't have the most tight tolerances. It's not designed with accuracy as the paramount feature. And a gunsmith can make a chamber for that cartridge and make it just as accurate as anything else. Or if you get a high-end rifle with high BC, match grade bullets, you can turn basically any one of those cartridges into a very accurate, round. But then I guess the final question on that would be, what about the dimensions of the case itself? And the only thing that I've read or I can find that people generally agree with is that the shorter, fatter cases with a powder column that's shaped in that way does tend to ignite more consistently. Because remember, when it comes to accuracy, it's about consistency. If all other aspects are equal and there's no issues, it just comes down to consistency. And if your powder ignites or has the potential to ignite slightly differently every time, it could, in theory, cause a small deviation in accuracy. You're talking really small amounts here, but it is possible. Same with the freebore issue. Same with the angle of the throat and all that. Not the angle of the throat, but the angle of the chamber as it goes toward the throat. So there's the potential there. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there's a potential there. So a cartridge that does not have a shoulder, or a cartridge that has a long, tapered case, potentially has the possibility of being less consistent. And a more fatter, shorter column with a shoulder has the potential to be more consistent, which is what you want for accuracy. So that's really the only thing I can think of. So, if you look at a 300 Winchester short magnum versus a 300 H&H magnum, based on everything I've said, let's say that the rifle quality was equal. Let's say that the chamber tolerances were equal. Let's say that you're shooting exactly the same weight bullet, the same model bullet, everything. It's the same bullet from the same maker, no difference whatsoever. Shooting it on the same day at the same elevation. Literally all the variables are removed. The only difference would be the case design. Do you think that the 300 short magnum would be inherently more accurate than the 300 H&H magnum? My answer is, I think so. I think probably. I think over time, the consistency of that powder burning in that type of a case design would lend to more consistent burning than the long, tapered, not as directive or not as steep as of a shoulder angle of the 300 H&H case. So my answer would be yes, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But even if I'm right, I think it would be very, very minor. And I don't think it would be that, like if all the other things are equal and it's only about the case design of the 300 H&H versus the 300 short mag, I think there would be a slight advantage, at least in theory, to the WSM over the H&H, but it would be so minor, I don't think anyone's really ever going to notice. Am I right? Am I wrong? I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. This is just my opinion, and I'm definitely not an expert. Just a guy drinking coffee. One more quick topic before I let you go today. I want to talk about a 30-06 versus 270. And here shortly I'm going to make a cartridge review on the 270 short mag and why I like it. But even when I was a boy, I would get reloading manuals from my uncles and I would read all about different cartridges and their history. And what I loved to do was look at it on a trajectory chart. Look at how the different bullet weights would perform and how they would retain their energy and all that. And the two cartridges that always fascinated me when I was younger was the 270 and the 30-06. And I always wondered which was the best, And so I remember that I was pretty young at this point, but I looked at a Sierra reloading manual that in the back had the charts of how it would fall over distance. And I remember I was comparing the 130 grain 270 with 180 grain 30-06 because I felt like that was the sweet spot for those two calibers. Like if I was going to get a 270, I would go with a 130 grain bullet. If I was going to get a 30-06, I'd probably lean toward the maybe 165, but maybe 180 grain. And so I compared the 130 270 and the 180 30-06. Of course, the first thing I realized is within a couple hundred yards, there's not a lot of difference. Say you have both of those, sighted in to be dead on at 100 yards. At 200 yards, the 270, of course, is a little flatter, but it's not enough to worry about. The difference between 100 and 200 yards on the trajectory is negligible. So it really doesn't matter. The only question would be, do you prefer a little less recoil or do you prefer a little bit more energy in a little bit wider surface area? And me personally, in that 1 to 200 yard range, I would prefer a little bit more energy and a little bit bigger bullet versus a little bit less recoil. And then I realized in that comparison from 2 to 400 yards, there was a definite advantage to the 270, especially from 3 to 400 yards. The flatter shooting, a little bit faster bullet definitely is going to drop a significant amount less. Not a crazy amount less, but a significant amount. Doesn't have as much energy, of course, but it is much flatter shooting. And it would be easier, I think, at hunting whitetail deer, for instance, at what I would consider long-range hunting, like around 3 to 400 yards, to use a 270 over a 30-06. Now, I don't consider anything past 500 yards ethical, except for certain exemptions, maybe out west or in Alaska in mountainous regions. It's more normal, it's more feasible out there, but in most parts of the world, 300 and 400 yard shot is a long shot, and you probably shouldn't shoot past there. But for long range hunting, at say something like an antelope, mule deer, whitetail deer, between 300 and 400 yards, the 270 would just be better, I think, than a 30-06. Just flatter, and it would be easier to hit the animal, I believe. What about, say, 500 to 1,000 yards? Well, that comparison was really neat. I realized that 180 grain bullet had a higher ballistic coefficient, and it would lose energy slower and lose velocity slower because it would be more aerodynamic, be bucking the wind better. And at 1,000 yards, the 30-06 was actually flatter than the 270. The 270, after a while, with that 130 grain bullet, just kind of died. And it was really neat to see that at 1,000 yards, the 30-06 is flatter, or at least really close. But it definitely gained ground and well, definitely it had more energy from the beginning, and it will have more velocity by the time it gets to 1,000 yards. So now for hunting, that doesn't matter. You're not going to be hunting at 1,000 yards, but it was just a neat thing to look at. So as a kid, I thought, well, the 30-06 is the way to go. 1 to 200 yards, more energy. 500 to 1,000 yards, higher BC, better shooting for long range. The only caveat I saw was that 2 to 400 yard range, where the 270 definitely had an advantage. Now, of course, that's not a fair comparison if you're looking at just BC. A more fair comparison would be 150 grain 270 to 180 grain 30-06. And then it would be pretty close. It would perform about the same, maybe a slight edge to the 180 grain bullet, but pretty darn close. The only difference at that point would be excluding the 6.8 Western, all the 270 calibers pretty much stop there. You can't go higher on the BC, but you can definitely go higher with a 30-06. You can go to a 200, 210 grain bullet. So I felt like the potential of the 30-06 was better when it comes to high BC long range bullets. What if you go to the reverse? What if you go, you stick with that 130 grain 270, but you go down to like 150 grain 30-06? That's another comparison that's pretty close. Not exactly, but the BC would be pretty close. In my opinion, the 270 is just a better option at that point, because if you're going for flat shooting, like if that's your whole thing, is I want something flat, I want something fast, well, that's where the 270's wheelhouse is, So it's like, don't try to change the 30-06 to be like the 270, just go with the 270. So if you're shooting lighter bullets, I think the 270 is a better option. Less recoil, flatter. That's where its wheelhouse is. But the 30-06's wheelhouse is just the more energy, the heavier bullets, and the better potential at really long ranges. So it's just an interesting thing to think about. I've always picked the 30-06, but anytime anyone's ever said, my favorite cartridge of all time is the 270, or the cartridge I use for deer hunting is the 270, I'm just thumbs up. I think it's a phenomenal cartridge. It's one of the best of all time. Just not my personal favorite. To me, the 30-06 is just more versatile, has a little bit longer barrel life. Once again, most of your distances that I would be shooting at animals in my part of the world is not going to be past 200 yards. Definitely not going to be 300 or 400 yards. And so that flatter shooting bullet is just not necessary, So I would go with a 30-06. It just has more energy and more punch. But the difference between a 270 and a 30-06 is like you can't make a wrong choice. If you just closed your eyes and blindly picked one, you're not going to go wrong. It's good either way. I prefer the 30-06, but I would not fault anyone for picking a 270. And the less popular 280 is right in the middle of them, and in all honesty, might be the best. I mean, if you think about it, it's so stinking close to a 270, yet it just has, it's more versatile. So 270, 280, 30-06, 25-06, all them bullets based off that case are phenomenal. My personal pick is a 30-06. So, hope this has been interesting to you. And until next time, have a great day and take care.